right. Welcome to uh, Backend Engineering with Node.js. In this class, we are going to be treating middleware. So, in the last class, we are able to create token. But what is middleware? Remember that I said when you are authenticated, the server actually checks. Before the server checks, before your request hits your server, there is something called middleware. Sorry, before your request hits your endpoint, let me, let this be your endpoint. Okay, I think the other illustration makes sense. This request got into your server now, right? Now let's say this is your endpoint. This is your endpoint, which is slash tags to create tags. Now, on a normal, if you are authenticated, if you are not authenticated, you basically, when you make the request to the server, it basically goes to the tags. But now that we've implemented authentication, whereby we are expecting a token from the user, that is, the token should be passed as a request, right? The token should be passed through the request, not as a request. The token should be passed through the request. So now we need to define something else that stands in between the words, that stands in between the server and that endpoint. So what stands in between the server and that endpoint is called middleware. So now what does this middleware do? It basically checks. So the first thing to do is to check if the request has the token. That is the token that we generated that will be sent from the request. It will check, this middleware will check, does it have that token? Now another thing to check again is the token valid? So can you see that? So to check if the token is valid or if it is has it not expired? So that's it. So it will check if it is valid. Now the next thing to check is so it will then set the payload to the request. So we are going to see all this. It will set the payload to the request so that we can be able to access the user without passing. Let me just make it more practical. So that's basically what the middleware does. So another thing is so let's do something. So we are going to define our middleware. Okay, I want to note if these conditions are not passed, the middleware will return that request. It will return it back to the server, and the server will return back a response, something like 401, and 401 could be unauthorized. Code 401 could be unauthorized, meaning that you are not allowed to access that endpoint. So something else that you can do is we need to define that middleware. So we need to define the middleware. So now inside this middleware now, I need to define something called, let's say, tags.middleware. No, not even tags, auth middleware .js. So we have our auth the middleware.js. So I have my auth middleware. So now I have my auth middleware. So I have my request response and now if this middleware passes, if it passes these three checks, there is a function. So it will call the next for this middleware. Yeah. When this middleware passes, when this checks passes, we are going to call this next so that we can move to the endpoint. If not, that next will not be executed. it will revoke it back. It will revoke the request what back to that server. So the server will send what to send that unauthorized error back to the user. So meaning that the user is not authorized. So now we would get export const hot middleware, then I will have my request and response. So the middleware has access to the request and response. Now it also has access to it also has something else called next. So it's that next that will determine if we are going to move to the next endpoint, or we are going to revoke access to that endpoint and return unauthorized. So um, so now that we are here, so the first thing we need to check is we need to check if token is available. Then what else? We need to check if token is valid. Then we need to set payload to request user. So are you following? So we need to set payload to what? To request user. So for this checking of if token is available. So how do I do this, or where do I check from? So the question is how do I do this and where do I check from? So now remember that, not even remember, in this when we want to make this our request for our create tags, now we can pass in our token into what? Authorization. So we can pass in our token into authorization. Now you see this authorization now, we can pass in our token as bearer token. So can you see that? So this way we are going to pass that token into. So from that our middleware, from this our middleware, we can now check if this token is inside that header. So are you following? So you can see that you can check if that token is inside that header. So now the first thing we need to do is to do what? You can say authentication header. You can say authentication header. So you can say authentication header. So can you see that? So I can have my request, then headers, then what next? Authorization. So can you see? So it's authorization. So you pass your token here. So let's see what happens. So let's do it step by step. So I'm going to console log out this authentication header. So I'm going to console log out this. So now one thing to note is that you pass your middleware before your endpoint. So for this middleware, we are going to copy it. So we are going to copy this one. Then we go to our endpoints. So let's go to where? Let's go to task controller. Yeah. No. Index.js. So we want to set it on all that router. So if you set it here, if you set your auth middleware here, it's going to affect all the routers. So all the router is going to be checking if the user is authenticated. But if you set it here, if you come to somewhere like here and you set it to only create tags, so unauthenticated user will be able to get, update, delete, and get tags. But now only authenticated user will be able to do what? To create tags. But for now, let's work with only tags and create tags. So let's import auth middleware. So I'll import auth middleware now. So it's working. So I want to let me run this. So you see that it's taking time to load. Now you see that it's taking time to load. Why? Because there is no next. It is inside this middleware and there is no next. So we are not calling this next to move to the next endpoint. So if I call that next, so you see that if I call next, so you see something. So can you see? So quickly it moves to the next this thing. Now you see that it said what? Authentication header what is undefined. You can see that. So I need to pass in my token into that um, bearer token. So I will need to go to register user. So we generated the token that time. Then create tags. Then I'll pass it into that token. So now we are good to go. But I don't want it to keep, okay, let's just keep creating tags. So now if I run this, now it's created. So can you see now that we have what? We have access to that authentic that token. So we have bearer, then we have that token. So can you see that? So we have bearer and we have the token. So now I want to check if, so now we will now check, we'll add a check. So the first check is what? We want to check if there is no authentication header, or if there is no authentication header, or if there is no authentication header, that is, if the authentication header does not start with, I think there is what's called starts with, I think, is it starts with or start with? So if it does not start with bearer token, so it has to start with bearer token because you are using bearer token here. So what we pass is bearer then token from what you saw in the other example. So can you see it's bearer and token? So it has to start with bearer. So now if it does not start with bearer token, we need to do what? We need to return. So we are not going to call that next. We need to return status then 41, which means it is unauthorized. Then you pass in your message that says what? So the message will say something like access denied, no bearer token. So can you see that access denied, no bearer token? So are you following? So now the next thing is to check if what the token is valid. We need to check if the token is valid. So, but for us to check if the token is valid, we need to strip out that token from what? From we need to strip out that token, because if you check here, you see that we have bearer and token, but we need to get only this token. So how do I do that? I can just say const token is equal to authentication header. Then I want to split it. I want to split it. So if I split it, bearer will be at index 0. This one, this token will be at index 1. So I'm getting it. So now I'm able to, I've gotten the what, the token now. So I want to do my try cache. So if anything happens after here, I can say rest the status 41 JSON. Let me just say unauthorized. So let me just say that. So now the next thing I need to do is to decode that token. So I need to decode the token. So I need to say something like decoded token. So I need to say JWT. So I need to import my JWT from JSON web token. Import JWT from JSON web token. I'm importing my JWT from JSON web token. So I will now do what? Verify. So I want to verify if that token is valid. So I'll pass the token and I'll pass the secret key. So what's our secret key? You are getting our secret key from process.env.jwt secret what key. So can you see that? So now let's console log out that decoded token. So let's see what's happening. Or not actually decoded token. Okay, let's just call it decoded token. So let's see what happens. Let me remove this. So let me make that request. Let me make that call again. So just watch the terminal. So let me make that call again. So it's actually created. Now you can see that what we decoded is what. So we have the decoded token, which consists of our ID and our email. So we want to pass this decoded token into what? Into that request. So we can say something like our request, which is this request now. We can say request dot what dot user. We want to pass in that decoded token. So now any endpoint that need user ID will no longer be the user will no longer need to be passing the user ID as a payload. So we can just get the user ID from what? From the request. So can you see that? So we can just get the user ID from the request as long as you are authenticated. You get that? So we no longer need to be passing user ID from what? From the request body. So now I can now call my what? I can call my next. So now we are done with our middleware. So we are done with our middleware. So we are done with our middleware. So our middleware is only applied to what? It's only applied to create tags. So can you see that? So so if I want to create tags, so if I call this, so it's creating. Now remember that in our body we are passing what? We are passing what? We are passing user ID. Can you see that? In our body we are passing user ID. But now since you are authenticated and in our auth, in our auth the decoded token is passed into request.user. So and this decoded token consists of what? That our ID, it consists of email. So we no longer need to be passing user ID here. So I could go to my auth validator. Okay. So I could go to my auth controller. So are you following? So we no longer need to be passing, sorry, tax controller. So I no longer need to be passing what? That user ID as body, tax validator. So I don't need to pass user ID here. So go back to tax controller. So can you see that? So we no longer need to be passing user ID here now. So I can get my user ID from what? From my request, as long as I'm authenticated. So I can say something like request, or let me show you. I can say something like request.user.what ID. Remember, I already passed that from my what payload. So if I come here now, let me show you what's in that request.user, which is what we are passing here, which is what we are passing here. This decoded token is what we passed into request.user after we decoded it from the token. So let me show you. If you come here now and you create tags, so you see that it's creating. So you can see that console log, this console log here, so you can see that it's giving us the same thing, which is what we set from here, which is what we set here from this decoded token. We set it into this request.user and we now have access to it anywhere as long as we are authenticated. So can you see that? So you can see that the user ID is set now.
Every user, so now every any user that comes to create
This tag does not need to pass its own user ID. The user just need to make sure that he is authenticated. Then we are going to fetch the ID from the user token and use it to create the tags. So I believe that you all understand this now. So in the next course, in the next lesson, I'm going to be going through how to fetch uh, tags of a particular user. So thank you very much. See you in the next lesson.